talked about Mike O'Donnell and I put on just a quick workshop for the Iowa Lean Consortium. And so some of the information will go in here, I'll be pulled out of this for this purpose. And then some of the other stuff has just been things I've picked up over the last couple of years as I've been trying to learn more about environmental problems and seeing the strong connection back to lean. So the objective today is to try to kind of motivate you to look a little bit deeper into how environmental issues and environmentalism ties into what you do at work, and also how that applies to the company you work in. See if there's some opportunity where you can leverage some of these ideas to take advantage of not only improving the business, but also getting some benefits there, some side benefits that go with it. And this presentation will be available for you guys, so definitely there's links on here, and you'll have information, all that information. So this is the agenda. I wanted to talk first about sustainability, and then get into carbon footprint, just to try to get everyone on the same page. So if this is something that's familiar to you already, maybe a refresher. Maybe it's new information for you. And then we'll talk about why companies are starting to go down this path of looking at green initiatives and sustainability and why they think that's important. There's also some side benefits that come along with it. So I'm going to touch on an example and kind of talk about some of those benefits that some companies may be overlooking. I also want to talk about the tie into lean and why I think it doesn't quite capture some of these issues fully. And then I'll give a couple different examples of some of the tools and how they're tweaked a little bit to help with some of these environmental concerns. And then at the end, I want to also try to tie in back into some supply chain things. See if you guys have had some interest or some focus or a bit of involvement in some of these activities going on. And if not, maybe it's an area you can look into a little bit further. So again, I don't intend to give you a full training on every little thing that we bring up, but hopefully get your mind thinking about, hey, there's an area I could dig into a little bit further and I can do a little bit more research. And I've got a lot of links and stuff at the end to try to get you started. All right, with that, I'll get started. So sustainability, so that term is, you're hearing that a lot more, and there's a lot of different definitions out there. Does someone have some quick definitions that they've heard, that they like, or that they think is a good representation of that? You hear the word sustainability, what's that mean to you?
When I think about it in terms of not harming the environment, it's like we can do all the logging and mining, but the logging you're describing won't be sustainable, keep logging, just mining.
Okay, so harm to the environment. Okay, that's good. And you mentioned that, is it something that we can continue to do over and over again, or do we hit a point where there isn't anything left in there? Okay, so perfect. Anyone else? Any other?
Okay. Number one, the environment means the conditions we live in,
Yep.
as well as the way we do things. If we continue to do things the way we do in the environment all along, it'll be the way it is.
Right.
It's sustainability in two different areas. One is good, one's bad.
So yeah, it gets into this long-term thinking about at the rate we're going, or the things that we're doing as a business or individuals, is that sustainable? Can that last over a long period of time? And so one of the things that you mentioned here is the ability for future generations to meet their own needs at that same level. And if the answer is no, that the present cannot keep that up, then we're not in a sustainable condition. And so how do we get back to that level where it is sustainable? So what does that mean for business then? It's very similar in that you've got customer demands, and you have to try to meet those expectations, but also keep in mind what your your suppliers and the community. What can they handle? And so you want to minimize the impact on those groups as much as possible and really understand who are your stakeholders and are you capturing everybody's input fully when you're making business decisions. Not just what's going to give me the most profit today. It's also balanced integration of social and environmental issues that go along with that profit. So have any of you guys heard of that, the triple bottom line concept? Okay, so it's either people, profit, or planet, or economic, social, and environmental. So those three areas are kind of the three legs of the stool. And if you are only concerned about profit, you are running a risk with your company of having issues come up on the planet side and the people side that will impact your company's ability to continue doing business. And so that's the real gist of this is how do we keep the business thriving for generations to come? And so how do we make decisions that are looking more than just profit? So here's an example. If you go to the store, you go to the shelf and you see that there's a price on there. And that's purely the economic piece of the decision. You look at it and say, I need milk and I'm going to find the one that's got the lowest price. That's a purely economic decision that's made. From a social standpoint, there might be things you want to look at in terms of nutritional value. So what's this have? What's the healthiest milk I can select in terms of calories or fat content? You might even look at the way that the milk was processed, handling of how the cows were managed, fair trade for the workers involved and the farmers that are involved. That's a social aspect of the milk. That doesn't show, may not show up in that price. And then from the environmental standpoint, look at proximity to where you live. So talk about food miles. In other words, how far does your food travel before it gets to you? And I think over the years you've seen that distance is starting to increase quite a bit. So as people become more aware, they start saying, well, I want to get from more local sources because there's less transportation. But I also want to consider stuff like hormones and chemicals that are added to my milk to make sure that I want to minimize the amount of additives or coloring or genetic modifications that are added. So those are other things to consider. And that's kind of the triple bottom line approach is that those have a fair comparison in your decision making as an individual, but also as a business, that we're looking at all those three areas. And we're saying, here's the best decision for our business with all these things understood and brought to the table. Does that make sense? Okay. There's actually on this environmental one, they're actually starting to work on a way of figuring out carbon emissions for each item of food. And I think they kind of disbanded that because it was quite a bit of effort. It wasn't really catching on yet, but that was kind of the intent is they'd start to try to put some numbers to this environmental impact. So you can kind of evenly weigh, well, this one's 900 grams and this one's 700, so this one's better. Okay, but it never really kind of took off. That was a UK initiative. Maybe they'll bring it back. Get a little bit more interest in people. Who's familiar with carbon footprint? Heard of it before? Okay. And so this is one of the more popular ways that companies are starting to report their environmental impact by looking at what is our carbon emissions. And basically what it does, it looks at greenhouse gases, which are the gases that have an influence on the greenhouse effect in the atmosphere. And they weight them according to how much strength or impact they have on them. And so carbon dioxide is the most prevalent one we have in our atmosphere. And there's other ones that are more potent actually, but they don't show up as often. And so what they did is try to figure out a way to even those out. And instead of saying, well, we produce this much methane, this much carbon dioxide, this much CFC, they just said, let's just make a standard metric called carbon emissions. So they kind of normalize it to that. And what a company can do then is then pretty big number when you look at reductions, especially when you think about a lean perspective, trying to cut something 80% is a pretty big chunk. There's a lot of work to be done, I guess. So does anyone have? Do you know if your company has a carbon footprint report or a carbon reporting mechanism of some sort? Does anyone have? Know if their company does?
Is it a self-reporting or is it like when you mentioned?
Let me get to that. Let me see who. Does anyone else? Does anyone know for sure? Yes, we do actually. So Rockwell, yes, we do. Anyone else? No one else knows it offhand? You guys do? Okay. Good. No? You don't? Okay. All right. So this is something that's starting to gain some popularity over the last couple of years. So you can see from like 2003 to now, this is the number of, actually it's the dollars that are being allocated from companies that are reporting the total revenues, but also the quantity of companies that are reporting the carbon footprint. And this is purely, it's not a mandatory thing. So, well, kind of like you have customers, things aren't necessarily mandatory, but it's like highly recommended you do this type of thing. So, usually it's customer driven or investor driven. So this carbon disclosure project is actually a group of investors that are trying to drive. They want to know what companies are doing because if some of the forecasts are correct and they start seeing different weather events or a reduction in the amount of energy sources that are out there, they see that as a business risk. And so they want to know what are these companies doing to mitigate that risk so we can feel like it's a safe investment in that company. And so that's a lot of the driver of that. I know Rockwell does that because our main customers have asked us to participate in it. So it's kind of you don't have to do this, however, we really like to see it. So
it's
we
safe to say
definitely.
that the main customers are.
What's that?
So it's safe to say that the main customers are reporting.
They have not. I don't remember offhand, but I know they're not doing it every year. But I know they have done both done it in the past with Boeing and Airbus. Okay, so anyways, a lot of companies are. Oh, go ahead. You have a question?
Is this the same as the green certification that companies get?
It's different because I don't think this ties into any kind of certification
So it's
specifically.
like when Apple lost the green certification of their products that they were made.
Yeah, that was or something like that.
Yeah,
That's a specific evaluation of that of a product that they put out, and then it says, okay, yeah, the way you manufactured it, the materials you're using, that qualifies under a certification. So it's a little different. This is usually at like a company level. It can be done at a city. So City of Iowa City has a carbon footprint report. It could be done for an event, music event or concert or venue. They could do a carbon report for that. So lots of different ways to do it. It's just kind of scope it and then try to calculate what those emissions are. Basically what you're doing is you're rolling up energy usage, transportation. Those are kind of the primary ones, and trying to just get a feel for a way to report that out. Okay, so we have some voluntary activity going on by companies. And usually the main reasons are these ones on the left here. So we've got financial impact where they might see that there's a market there for some products or some, maybe if they're looking at their waste streams, they can say, you know what, we can sell this stuff instead of throwing it away. We can actually sell this for money to another company. So there might be revenue benefits for becoming more green. Or they see the cost of their energy utilities. They see their waste streams and the cost of landfill charges. They look at material costs, packaging costs, transportation costs, and they say, you know what, there's ways we can cut this down. If we look at it a little bit more closely, there's a way so we can directly just save some money. And that's obviously going to help your margins. Also looking at, they see it as a way to help drive long-term perspective at their company. So it kind of forces you to look a little bit more long-term. And so they see it just helps with some of that long-term strategic planning. So some of the projects you might try to go after might be about renewable energy, which may have paybacks of 10 years or more, and that might be more than what most companies look at. So it kind of forces them to kind of look beyond just the couple year period that they normally do. There's also some risks and legal things that they might want to do this. Regulatory compliance, so there's laws and there's permits that they have to adhere to, and they want to make sure that they're compliant with that. So either on a proactive basis to avoid having an issue, or they actually did have an issue and now they're reacting to that and trying to fix that issue. And just looking at it from a future risk that hey, we're vulnerable in this area, and we want to try to do something to keep that risk down, minimize that risk to our business. So that's some of the drivers on the left side here. However, on the other side, these aren't necessarily things that companies are going after, but they are seeing benefits on there. And especially on the employee side, we start seeing motivated and engaged employees as they get involved in some of these activities. Energy reduction projects, light shut off, equipment shut off activities, waste sorts. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So they start to get engaged and they say, you know what, our company is starting to do a lot of these things. It's pretty cool. I like this. I feel like they're doing the right things, and I've been involved in that. So they're seeing some side benefits coming out of that. Also about retention and acquisition of employees. So as you're seeing a younger generation of kids come through companies, they're starting to ask those questions of, what do you guys do to manage your energy costs? How do you guys help with the local community? Do you have money that you're investing in environmental restoration projects? Do people recycle when they come to the cafeteria? Are there recycling bins around? Do I have compostable items? Can I get an organic food option in the cafeteria? So they're starting to ask them those questions and making decisions. Says, I want to work for a company that's doing the right thing. I want to feel proud of what they're doing. And that might make a decision whether I go with this company or this one. So getting talent in the door or keeping them from leaving and going somewhere else. So that's how you quantify that benefit. That's huge dollars. Also, when you look at customers and sales, opening up new markets, trying to address some issues. So we've got a product that has certain material that is they're trying to minimize that material because of the hazard it provides, and trying to figure out a way to get it out of the product can lead to new types of products, new innovation. That all of a sudden now you've got a different market of customers that are interested in that, what you figured out. And that might not have been the original intent. You might have been trying to save money over here, and all of a sudden you open up a new market of product. Quaker Oats had the oat hulls that they didn't know what to do with. They were throwing them away, and they figured out the University of Iowa could burn them for fuel. And so they just started selling them to the University of Iowa. Actually, they gave them away to them for first of all. Then, now they've realized this is a commodity. You can't have it for free anymore. You're going to have to pay for it. And actually, there's other customers that will pay a lot more for it, so sorry, you can't have it anymore. So now the University of Iowa is looking for a new source of that. Awesome. So all those things. And then also customer loyalty. So you got customers that they see that the company is investing in this, and they say, wow, that's a pretty good company. If I have to make that decision, I might be willing to pay a little bit more for that because I know that they're doing some good stuff. I'm going to reward them for that. Or just the product differentiation and innovation that I kind of mentioned before is providing that benefit or that extra feature of that product or service that makes them stand out from their competitors. Or maybe it's just because they want to stay ahead of their competitors or stay close enough to them. Or their customers, again, come in and say, we want this. Or their employees say, we want to have a green team, we want to have a garden on our campus. Then the companies will do it because they say, hey, we're trying to keep our customer or our employees happy. So whatever, there's a lot of different motivations for doing it, but there's some unintended benefits that come along with it that the company may not be realizing are there. Actually, I found APICS had a supply chain sustainability report that they came out with. And I kind of touched on, I just saw market awareness and goodwill benefits that companies are getting out of some of their sustainability efforts. So might be something you want to check out. So let me give you another example of some of the side benefits. So let's say you've got a product like a TV, just as an example here, and you said, you know, we're responsible for the end of life of that product. And you're starting to see companies that more and more are held to that responsibility. They can't just say, we sold it to you, it's hands off anymore. They're starting to see more and more regulations that are coming down and say, no, you're super responsible for that. If it ends up in the landfill, we can come back to the company and say, why are these things ending up there? So companies are having to kind of have an answer for this. And so a company might look at it and say, well, we could probably take some of the scrap out the unit that we get back through this take back program we set up. Maybe we can make a little bit of money on it. It will look good for the community and our customers that we're doing this, so we'll get a little goodwill out of it. And we'll avoid some landfill charges. So there's some maybe financial or legal improvements we can get out of it. But on the side benefit side, what they might also find is they actually have to interact, or they get to interact with their customer. So the customer comes back, brings back this TV. Now you just have an opportunity to dialogue with them. Hey, how did it work out for you? Well, most of the time worked great, but I started to have this issue with this, this, and this. Okay, well I also noticed that thing's cracked off on the side of the display. Why is that? Oh yeah, every time we try to move this thing, it's, you know, I got to pick it up on the side here, and it's easy to squeeze it too hard, and then I crack it. Now you're learning a ton of information about your customer use, and you can see what they have done with their product. You're interacting with them, so now they feel like there's some stronger connection to the company. You might just see that there's some changes you can make to address some of those issues that you're seeing. You can opportunity to sell them on something else. Hey, we can give you a coupon or a discount on this new product, new version we have. And that customer loyalty, they're going to be a lot more loyal to your company just for having an interaction and saying, you know what, they heard of my complaints and they really seem like they took it to heart. So all those things can come out of a simple take-back program. It looks like an expense. And all of a sudden now you've got this interaction and feedback system with your customers. So that's an example where some of these benefits came out. It maybe wasn't even part of the original intent of your green efforts. So a company decides now, I want to go green and want to try to go down this path. What can they do? And obviously you want to look for things that can save them money or reduce some of those risks. And there's 5 different areas. And Mike will touch on this a little bit more deeply in his presentation. But there's 5 areas, and the acronym is WASTE. But it's waste, so it's water, air, solids, toxicity, and energy. So it's kind of an easy way to remember some of and try to categorize those types of issues into those 5 buckets. Okay, so your water is pretty straightforward. How much water you use in your processes. The air gets into like particle, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide emissions, carbon dioxide. The solids it gets into your landfill type of thing. So what are you throwing away basically? It's going to landfill. And recycling is kind of tied in underneath there. Toxicity gets into some of the chemicals and some of the metals and the chemicals you're using in your processes that have to be treated differently or handled differently from a hazard perspective. And then energy is going to be your natural gas, electricity, cost and usage goes along with that. So normally you would think that, well, this all kind of falls underneath an umbrella of process improvement that it probably would get handled in your typical lean program. But I think there's a couple issues and reasons why it doesn't necessarily work that way. And the first one is a lot of these are viewed as just cost of doing business. So they don't, maybe a lot of companies may not look at this as, hey, we can really cut these costs down quite a bit. Probably just say, well, it must cost this much electricity to run our facility or our buildings. So I guess that's just the cost we have to live with. And then it's not really looked at it from a whole big perspective and say, look at this total number or amount of dollars we have here. How can we approach it like any other problem and go after it. So the initial idea is, okay, so yeah, again, it's not really looked at as, hey, we could do something about this, and we should challenge that this is the amount that we have to spend on this type of thing. So do we really have to spend that much on our landfill charges? Do we really have to spend that much on our electricity? And another reason for that is that the way in which the money gets allocated out doesn't help at all. So does anyone know how their utilities get allocated out into their buildings or facilities?
To the bottom line of the cost.
Bottom line of the cost, okay?
Compared to overhead.
Do you see your actual usage of water or electricity? You just get a blanket number that says
Right.
the whole facility uses this much, you have this much square footage or this many people. We're going to divide it out and then get a bill or you get a budget that's allocated. So,
All the overhead.
right. So when a department says, you know what, I'd like to do something about this water that we're spending. So I'm going to make a little investment, and we're going to put in some things to help avoid some of the leaks we're having with our pipes. And I'd like to see where that benefit's going to show up on my budget. And they're going to say, well, it's just going to get blanketed across everybody else's budget. So you might spend $10,000 on it, and you're going to see $200 in savings. Now the company might benefit across the board, but your budget didn't change any, so there's not a lot of motivation for that department manager to go off and spend that kind of money, and they're not even going to see that benefit. So that's another issue where the way it's allocated out, it's not because you're the big user, you get all the costs assigned to you, but then you also get the benefits when you make the improvements. So the more you can allocate things out to those departments and areas based on the actual usage of electricity and water and hazardous material, landfill, and trash, the more likely you're going to see direct benefits and changes from those people making those improvements. So without that, it's really hard to kind of convince people it's the right thing to do for the company at a high level, even though you're not going to directly benefit your budget at that lower level. So that's kind of working against this as well. Another thing could be that a lot of the opportunity doesn't show up when people are actually there. And I'll touch on this briefly as well. So you might see that when people aren't there is when actually a lot of the opportunity shows up. Things are leaking and there's rattling and noises going on, and then it's really cold in an area where nobody's at and everybody's at home. Or there's lights left on and nobody's there. So you have to go and you know, the whole lean concept of go and see, you actually have to go and see when nobody's there. Also another thing is just trying to understand the environmental and the health risk or impact of some of the things that are going on. So you have emissions issues that are getting out of your smokestacks. Do you really understand how to quantify that appropriately to say that this is the right thing to do because we're going to get these health benefits to the community later on? That gets tricky to try to quantify that. So maybe those aren't getting fully wrapped up into the business decisions. Or you're going to clean up the water stream. It's going to be cleaner than before. Well, how do you quantify that? And so you can make a good business decision. It's very difficult. So that might be another reason. And then I mentioned the side benefits. Maybe those aren't even incorporated into your business case. So you can't see that that's additional opportunity. And maybe that 5-6 year payback looks a little bit stronger are some of the reasons I think why the traditional lean isn't really able to just wrap this up as part of the improvements. And the other thing is just trying to understand this total cost of some of these issues. So it's kind of trying to understand the hidden cost. So a product gets broken in your shipping department, and you got the true cost. You're trying to understand this true cost of that waste. So you've got the cost of that wasted raw material, and everyone's pretty clear on that. It's going to have a scrap cost or a dollar value of some sort that you're going to lose. But then you also figure out, well, I just spent time and lighted the area, I heated and cooled that area, and now I didn't get any credit for it. So I got to go back and do that over. So now I got to maybe stay later and do that, spend more utility cost, and labor cost and time put into it. I really captured all that in my calculations. What about if it's a hazard or a waste of some sort that needs to be handled treated uniquely? Someone's got to go through an extra process to put on the right protective equipment, to process that in a certain way, take it to a special storage area, use special containers. All that time and materials that also should be included. And then finally, just the disposal cost itself. So how do I get rid of this? If it's, especially something like a hazard or a waste of some sort, where's the cost of getting rid of it? And how do I calculate that into my big picture? So I think typically we kind of look at just the waste of material piece of that. Maybe do we really understand that full big picture? And some estimates they put in there is 20 times more than what a company might think that those costs are. And you really look at the full process of what goes on with some of these wastes. Okay, so from a lean perspective, obviously we want to try to apply the same lean concepts to a lot of these issues, and it works just as well as any other lean activity you perform. So here's some examples that the EPA put together. They've done a really good job of trying to tie lean into a lot of these efforts and put together some good business cases. So 3M showed 60% reduction on toxic inventory. These Columbia paint coatings, tens of thousands of gallons of reduction a year in paint and wastewater. Looking at 6 tons of waste reduction in another manufacturing facility. Those are the type of lean numbers you see from just traditional activities going on. And so the same kind of benefits can be seen just focusing on those particular wastes that I showed earlier, those 5 areas. So it just kind of takes a dedicated effort to kind of look at it. Or at least trying to understand and capture those savings. So IBM even came out and said they've got a 2-to-1 payback on a lot of the initiatives they've done. That's huge. That's really powerful. So, and I'll touch on the EPA a little bit later. They've got a couple of good toolkits around energy in the environment, lean in the environment, Lean Six Sigma professional's guide. They've really tried to make this connection. So I pulled a couple of things out of some of the toolkits. So if you don't remember anything about this discussion today, at least remember that just by doing lean itself, you were going to get some of these environmental benefits out of it by default. Now, the nice thing would be is to try to capture some of those. So when you see that you've got a cycle time reduction, you've got inventory savings, you're also capturing a lot less materials being used. And all those other benefits that go along with it. So that might not be the original intent, is to go after those reductions, but you might see that, hey, we're getting those benefits just by getting lean. Or the other approach would be start by focusing on those those environmental issues, and you'll also start to get some lean benefits that go along with it. Well, if I get rid of some of the material, I'm going to reduce some of my costs down. And if I can take some of the transportation time out of it, save some of the emissions or use of oil, then I'm going to save time, and that's going to speed up the process. So they work hand in hand together. It doesn't really matter which one you focus on, but just keep in mind that you're going to get some benefits naturally what's the thing that you think they have the biggest impact from an environmental perspective, and how can you address some of those things with your customers, your community, that makes sense for your business. And there's other things that are going to be a lot harder, more of a struggle for your business because of how it is. Obviously, Rockwell doesn't want to promote, stop flying planes. That's really going to impact our business, so we're probably not going to stay away from that part of it. But we do want to maybe focus on areas that are a little bit more closely tied to what we do. So we don't have a lot of air emissions issues, but we do use a lot of water in some of our processes. So that might be an opportunity. So if we have water issues, that can slow down some of our production. If there was, I know when we had the floods, there was, reduction in water. And I know a couple of the areas we're a little concerned that we're going to have enough water to finish our production runs. So that's a risk that would directly impact them, and motivation for them to focus on that particular aspect of it. Not just randomly, let's just do something and make it look like we're doing something. Tie it back to the business, so people, if there's a strong connection to leadership, and it makes it easier to sell that. Another thing to look at is we have these traditional 7 forms of waste in Lean. And each of these has an environmental impact on business. So just trying to understand, be aware of those additional things. So when you're looking for, trying to capture those benefits, you can use this form to kind of go back to it and say, all right, we had an overproduction situation. Now we had excess material. We have that material sits around and is now becoming more likely to be disposed of or go bad. Or for inventory, so you have inventory space allocated out. Well, someone's got to heat, cool, light that area. So that's extra waste to deal with that inventory. Defects, of course, are going to create more materials. And so this is just a way to help you try to capture some of those extra benefits when you look at the traditional 7 form of waste. So you guys can kind of read that later. Any questions about that? Or any questions so far? Okay. So here's a case study. They tried to do something similar where they took the waste and tried to show the benefits and how that had an impact on the environment. And I like this example because it did a good job of trying to suboptimize what they were doing, or try to avoid the suboptimization that sometimes takes place. So they were trying to look at some environmental improvements with their water usage and chemical usage. And also, I think they looked at energy costs. And naturally, you think, well, to save energy, we've got to turn down the heat on equipment. We got to not clean them as thoroughly, maybe, as what we think. And that's kind of the natural reaction to it. But what this study found was they actually increased the temperature in one of their processes because they realized there was 4 or 5 later cleaning processes going on that were a result of a lack of getting it done right the first time in that process. So they realized that their temperatures were already too low and it wasn't cleaning adequately. So when they raised the temperature up to make it more of an effective cleaning process, they were able to eliminate 4 cleaning processes later on and down the stream that were costing, taking up energy and chemicals and water. So if they wouldn't have, they could very easily suboptimize that and say, let's just keep turning down the temperature on this process, save some energy. And then they could have may not have realized that they just added more processing later on down the line. So again, it gives you that, when we look at that full value stream perspective, and not just say, what can I do in this one particular process step to save energy? So that might be suboptimizing it for everything else. So there's an article, you can read through that. We're not going to go through all that specific ones there, but it ties it back to those different forms of waste. Okay, this is a waste pyramid, and I want you to kind of think about this methodology as trying to make decisions about how do we eliminate or reduce down some of the impacts that we're looking at. So, if we use a traditional water bottle, and a lot of people say, well, I recycle my water bottle, so you look at this pyramid and say, okay, we're kind of down at the bottom. Actually, the higher is the better. The bottom is kind of way back up this pyramid to understand what is the best thing to do. So what would be an example of reuse for the water bottle before I recycle it? Yeah.
Use it as a dog toy before I
Okay, perfect. Now you can save on buying new dog toys.
Yeah, it's a big savings.
Yes.
So
Okay.
use it like repurpose.
Yeah. Or you could reuse it. You could fill up it. Yeah, in the water fountain. And not instead of buying a brand new water bottle, you could fill up the water bottle and drink the fountain a couple times. So okay, so that's reuse. That's another purpose of that before you recycle. How do we go back a step further and say, how do you reduce either the number of bottles you use or the size of the bottles? So maybe you've got, you're almost there. One more step. That'll be the refuse part. Thinner. Okay, so that's less material. So that's good. That's getting in the right direction there. So we're reducing the amount of content needed to produce each bottle. Maybe you go to smaller size. So instead of the 20 ounce, you go to the 12 ounce or 16 ounce size. Maybe you say, you know what, I'm only going to buy a fewer number of them. So instead of getting the huge 50 pack ones, I'm going to get it to 20. And I'm only going to drink one a day instead of two. So I'm reducing down, again, my total amount of water bottles that I consume.
I think Nestle says on their part of small cap size less
Cap size itself, yeah. So there's, so it's the whole material, either the actual bottle itself or the cap itself, yep. That's a good way too. So that now we're getting back to reducing it down, and then finally the last one would be how do we refuse it in the first place? And that's where you get into reusable cups, where you say, you know what, I'm not going to buy it, I'm just going to use a drinking fountain when I'm thirsty. So that's kind of the mindset here. So trying to get out of the thing and just that, okay, we're recycling, and that's a great thing, but try to work it back to all the way to refuse. Oh yeah, so the recover piece is then, before I send it to the landfill and just throw it away, there's still inherent energy in that bottle, so I can burn it basically, and produce energy out of that bottle still. There's a little bit of energy I can get out of it if I burn it. So incineration and some, I think Ames actually burns all their trash now. And so they take that energy and they turn it into electricity, I think. And, so there's some emissions things they got to work through and scrub out a lot of the contaminants, but at least they don't have a landfill anymore to throw stuff away in. So that's kind of the pyramid here of trying to walk your way back up to the refuse part. Okay, so let's look at a couple different tools here. Here's your traditional value stream map. One thing you do is just add in under the data box, add in those environmental metrics, water usage, electricity usage. And this one's a little difficult because I know that you start asking some of these questions in a mapping exercise, and it's like, we don't know, we've never measured the electricity on that equipment. We don't know how much it consumes. So the first couple times it's going to be a little frustrating, but if you keep asking that, eventually you say, you know what, there's a way we can meter that. There's a way we can capture some of that data. At least start that process so next time we update it, maybe we will have a number to put in. So that's one place you can put it, just on the data box of your value stream map. Another thing I've seen is just putting it in the timeline as its own separate line. So you have your line here for days, and you could also have one for how efficiently you're using the material across those processes. So what goes into that process and what comes out of that process. Some of that can be consumed in the process, others could be lost, and there might be opportunity there as well.
So that's saying, like in the center, it's engaged or 40 pounds, or using 40 pounds or something, that kind of that.
Yeah, so you're putting in 40 pounds of I think it's a chemical or something. And then the process is using 20 and then you're losing 20 somewhere. It's not even together. So you see that the total there is 195 pounds go into the process, start off in the process to get 110 pounds out of it. That actually gets consumed. So there's opportunity there that says, where's those other 80 pounds going? Is that stuff that's just getting lost in the yield of the process that we're not handling properly? Because we're paying for that, but we're not getting the So they just add it in as another timeline. So one of the things Rockwell's been doing is this energy go and see approach, where kind of talking about the looking for opportunities outside of the normal areas. Teams go, we try to scope out an area, so it could be the cafeteria or it could be maybe a little bit larger area. But we find a team of people that we want to bring in, and we have a little kickoff meeting, give them a little bit of background on what we're doing. We're trying to save energy, this is how much Rockwell spends, this is where we see some of the opportunity. For this event, we're going to have a couple different, we're going to come and evaluate this area a couple different times. Usually the one that gets the most value out is the weekend one, where you come in either at night or just sometime during the weekend and make those same observations about what's going on. So what's being left on. So this one, you see the example of the computer monitors on and the equipment's left on. Nothing's plugged in, nothing's running, so just sitting there. And this is on a Saturday afternoon and nobody's working. And the lights were on in another nearby area. And there's tools, there's electricity meters you can hook up if you want to measure how much electricity that particular equipment is pulling for that's being left on. You kind of quantify some of those things. But the real benefit of this one is you're getting the team members engaged in this, and they're starting to see the waste that they observed in that event. So hopefully what translates is they start to share that with your other people who weren't involved, and they start to look for new opportunities as they come up. I keep noticing that light is on every time I come in, and I don't know why that's left that way. Can someone do something about that? Or I keep hearing, there's a leak that I didn't notice when everything was working because it's really noisy in here, but when I came in over the weekend, I could hear that leak going on. Maybe someone needs to look into that, wasting water or something. And some of it too is trying to get education out to people to say, this is what it costs for us to leave on. And maybe it's only pennies for an individual, but across the company, everyone's doing it. And Rockwell has 20,000 employees, and that number adds up quite a bit. So try to bring that data to them as well. We did lots of these measurements and tracking and trying to understand the cost benefit of some of those things. Just so we can just say, don't just shut off because you should, but also there's business reasons to do so. And try to be smart about it, because it's really minor, it's a big hassle to do it. Let's find something that's a little bit more beneficial, where they see like there is some benefit from it. Okay, another one is looking at solid waste, trying to look at trying to get some data on where are we at. What does our solid waste look like? Because it goes in a bag and then it goes off on a truck somewhere, and no one really has a good feel for what's going on. So one thing you do is called dumpster dive or waste audit, where you try to actually store up all those bags, rip them apart, and go through the messy process of trying to figure out what's in there and categorize them. So you have different containers, and you look through it and say, this is recyclable, we can do something with this. This is definitely trash. Here's paper, it shouldn't be in here. Here's food, compost. So it gives you some good data to then make some decisions to say, man, we got some opportunity here. You make this pie chart and you come out with some kind of a plan that says, this is the stuff we're going to go after. We need better education about this particular items. We've seen a lot of this. We need a different waste stream for some of these things, because look how big it is. We didn't realize how much we're throwing away in this particular item. And the categories aren't critical. It's just, again, you're getting people engaged. They get to go through that. It's a little messy, but at least they're usually a very strong memory around this particular event. It really kind of sinks in. And so I've been involved in two of them that they did at the university, and the students really it kind of opens their eyes to what's going on. They said, I can't believe all this stuff is getting thrown away, or how much disposable items there are there. So that's another type of activity that so trying to predict and know, are we too high this month? Well, we can compare to last year and say, yeah, it's a little bit higher than last year, but the temperature's not exactly the same either, so maybe we had a mild winter last year and a cold one this year. So it gets really tricky in trying to figure out, are we having problems or not? Are we spending too much electricity? Do we have leaks? Do we have something going wrong in the system? So one thing you can start to do is look at how do we model out that electricity performance so that we can understand it and then know when we're starting to have some issues. So on this graph here, that black line represents the actual usage of electricity. And then based on some key factors that we plug in, the red line kind of approximates what that usage should be based on history. So you take, a 2-year snapshot and you model this out and you say, here are the key factors that are driving our electricity usage. And in this particular example, in this facility, we figured out that the temperature outside had a lot to do with electricity. Surprise. And how much production we had a lot to do with how much electricity we spent. Another big surprise. And how many employees are working that month had a lot to do with that. Okay, so we got to figure out how we reduce the temperature outside, stop making things, and get rid of our employees, right? Obviously, that's not the direction we want to go. So we might say, well, see, there's nothing we can really do about electricity. It's out of our control. These are things we don't want to minimize. But if you look at it a little bit differently, think about what happens when things outside change, when the temperature changes outside. What physically happens in the facility that reacts to that temperature? What's that? Yeah, so all of a sudden it gets cold out and the furnace kicks in, it starts running. Okay? So what that would tell me is I need to look at my heating and cooling equipment and look to see, are those really running efficiently like they should? Because it is a big driver of the electricity. That's where the cost is coming in, is those motors and the equipment starts churning on. So it's not really the temperature I'm trying to control. I'm trying to control the equipment that is reacting to that temperature. And now, from a priority perspective, let me focus on that first instead of looking at lights or things like that. Because this is what the data is kind of driving me in that direction. Another thing with that production output. So what equipment is being used on these spares that may be a big energy driver? Let me look at that piece of equipment. Are we leaving it on all the time? Is it up to date? Maybe we need a variable frequency motor attached to it because it's really pulling a lot of electricity every time we run. So you start to look at the equipment that is affected by those variables. Same with employees. So what would you do about employees? I'm not going to get rid of employees, but what would having it on there as a key factor, what would that tell you?
Spread them out.
Spread them out. Okay, so maybe look at how do we,
Staff.
are they all scattered out in different areas? So we're heating this whole area, we only need really half the space. 22 days in the month or 18 days had nothing to do with electricity costs. I was like, that doesn't sound right. But when you start looking at some of this, well, your heating and cooling is there whether people are there or not. I mean, it goes up a little bit more with people are there, but it started to point us into stuff that's kind of like stuff that's always on, whether people are here or not. So it did start to make sense after that, but initially you thought, well, that would be a no-brainer. Of course, if you work more days, you should have higher electricity.
And let's start down with the issue of civics and capacity size ones, utilizing other ships.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, to maximize the space we already have. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of you have ES&H personnel that might be involved in some of these activities or maybe helping try to drive some of these. And a nice thing would be to have them at a lot of the lean events you have, but that's not always possible, especially if you only have like one person in your area. So there is a checklist that, again, the EPA put together as kind of a questions to ask during an event to see if you need to pull in somebody before you start making changes and moving stuff around. I mean, there's permitting things you've got to deal with. There's handling, storage issues, how much you can put in a certain container, how big the containers are, how long they have to sit out, all kinds of different rules that person might be puzzled with. So try to get them involved in the event, and if not, then maybe use this checklist if they're not there, so you can start to think about some of these things before you go too far into some of your changes and shifting and moving stuff around. So there's a couple different questions, like waste management, chemical storage, and I think it's physically moving things around. So to integrate this green stuff into your lean, here's just a couple of recommendations I have. On your SIPOC diagram, you've got customers on the far right of that column. That's supposed to be also your kind of your stakeholders. So try to make sure there's some kind of representation for the community or the earth or the environment in there. So there's at least some considerations for what impact are this process is going to have on there. Also, just capture some of these benefits. Have that 7 forms slide. Capture some of those side benefits that come along with the lean improvements you're already doing. So it can help sell the business case if you're trying to make some capital investment or get approval for something. It just helps with some of those by showing additional benefits beyond just the lean metrics. It shows you the value stream map. Add that into data boxes. Add the environmental impacts to your definitions of those 7 forms of waste. Again, try to tie these issues back to the business needs. That's going to give it a lot better chance to success than just, hey, we just want to go off and do a green roof. That's great, but is there a way we can tie it back into the business somehow? And then also look at specific ways you can go after some of these environmental metrics. So focus your lean efforts around waste water or water usage in general, or hazardous material costs, or landfill costs. Dedicate efforts and activity around that specifically. And because it will get lost in a bigger effort. If you're trying to reduce the inventory, product line, the energy costs are just going to fall to the very bottom. It's just going to be overwhelmed by the problems you're having in that particular process. So I think it really needs a dedicated focus for looking at it. And then those checklists that I showed, right, you can work those into some of your event templates. And then I've got a resources slide, so to share that with some of your lean and ES&H personnel. They might find some good benefits there as well. Again, you'll have these. Okay, so the specific supply chain issues and things that might come up. How many of you are familiar with ISO 14001? You heard of it, or what is it? Okay, so it's kind of like the ISO 9000 except for environmental management system. And so suppliers, a lot of suppliers are working towards those certifications. So the question I have is, does that matter for any of your suppliers? If they achieve a 14001 certification, does that give them any kind of benefit? activities that they're doing somehow kind of helps show, again, kind of going back to that triple bottom line. Is it just the lowest cost part I can find, or is it the company that also does a good job on the social and environmental piece? Is that how we're picking our suppliers, or are we just picking based on cost alone? Lead certification, people familiar with this? So yeah, the lead stuff is about like the building performance and give scoring criteria, and you see some of the plaques that are around that some buildings are LEED or gold or platinum certified. That means they should have lower energy usage, use of recycled content. Maybe it's the land that they picked was more of a hazard waste facility, and they've been able to transform it into something usable, so they get credit for that as well. But there's a lot of good criteria in there, and so when your facility or company does some upgrades or construction, do they take some of those best practices and incorporate those in? So when they go into an area, do they put in occupancy sensors? Do they put in low flow toilets? Or do they just kind of do whatever the cheese? So those are questions you can ask. Anyone familiar with the EPA Smart Way program? Okay, so that's an effort to try to reduce transportation-related emissions. So usually it's around semis and light duty trucks, and people who are on the road a lot, shipping, transporting stuff. So if you're in the logistics area, that might be something that's come up. And do you pick suppliers that have more fleets with that meet this smart way criteria? So those are things to think about. How about design for environment criteria on a new product or service? So if you look at those 5 wastes here, we've got pre-manufacture phase, manufacturing assembly phase, packaging transportation, product use itself. So once you've sold your product, now you want to look at what's the impact, what do your customers do with your product? Is there a way you can minimize the waste associated with that? The environmental waste. And then the end of life, so what happens after they're done using it? Where does it go? What happens to it? Is that part of your design criteria? Way up front before you even start making a drawing. And so there's these criteria around there, and the basic concept is you're trying to use abundant, non-toxic, non-regulated materials, natural instead of synthetic. You minimize the amount of energy usage in the product through these different phases. So you're starting to see Energy Star phone chargers. They're looking at how do I minimize the customer's impact after we sold it to them. Make sure the products don't deplete the ozone or increase global warming, or maximize the recycling streams instead of using brand new raw materials. So that kind of goes back to looking at, is there a way we can take advantage of some of the existing recycled material instead of getting brand new plastics right from the raw material itself. So that's another one that you might see more and more criteria. If you're involved in the design process, maybe you start to drive some of that. How about life cycle assessments? So this is trying to understand the whole, it's kind of trying to quantify those design for environment criteria. And so what you do is you basically try to inventory the whole environmental impact of your product or service through those different phases. So you're looking at how much energy does this equipment use, and how far do we ship this, and how much emissions is associated with that. So it's a very thorough, detailed analysis of that energy and environmental impact that it has. But it's there to help try to work back to the designers to make the most informed decision they can. And it ties really closely to your value stream mapping activity. So what you're seeing is a lot of customers or a lot of companies are just going off and saying, we're going to pick one product and we're going to do a full life cycle assessment on it and try to understand where our opportunity is, and then just to understand what happens after it leaves our 4 walls, and what do our customers do with this stuff, and where does it end up at the end of life. A lot of companies don't know that, so this life cycle assessment is a way to figure that out. Okay, and then the last one I'll touch on is environmental preferable purchasing. Has anyone dealt with this before? This is kind of on the government side. So basically, they came up with a program that says if you have when you're buying products and services, make decisions with the environment in mind, based on sustainable practices. So you're trying to find products and services that have lesser or reduced effect on either human health or the environment. So those are supposed to be getting more preferential treatment for, and I think they start off with kind of like office supplies and things like that, but I think they're starting to move, eventually start to move into more traditional products themselves. But it's starting to make up for maybe the fact that it's a little bit more costly for that organic or recycled content, but they have this policy in place to try to still give that preferential treatment for purchasing. So as more companies start to work with the government, that they can see that there's actually a chance to increase sales by going on that path. Okay, so this last part is just on the resources here. So Mike is going to come and talk a little bit more about his group. It's Cirrus, the University of Iowa State University. They work with small and medium-sized manufacturers, but they've got a Green 101 workshop. Kind of goes through that waste, those 5 areas, and a little bit more background. And then there's a wind turbine assembly simulation that they go through. And basically, instead of focusing on the lean metrics, they look at all the environmental metrics that go along with that assembly. And then there's a dumpster dive where you actually have a simulated, they have materials that they pull out a container and then they lay it all out there and people have to go through and sort out and categorize the waste. And then you come up with a calculation of where the opportunity is. And then you have to work backwards from there and figure out where does this come from in our processes. So how do we get it back to the refuse part of that waste pyramid? And then those 2 workshops came out of a Purdue Technical Assistance Program. And they've got stuff around water conservation, pollution solutions, waste stream mapping, they call it, green chemistry, so it gets into chemicals, hazardous stuff, energy management, and they've got those other 2 workshops. So they kind of really put a lot of good stuff out there for content. So those are usually like day or week long training sessions. And unfortunately, they have those at Purdue. If you really want to go, you can go there. I also have some books that so if you want to browse through these or not, but Green Intentions, kind of talks about the IQ mapping, Green to Gold, Green Manufacturing case studies, it gives you some case studies, some specific case studies to read through. Also Lean and Green and Six Sigma for sustainability. So each have different purposes, but those are the best ones I've seen where it's tying the lean and the environment together. So it has a link to the Iowa State University and Purdue, and then the EPA has a Lean and Energy Toolkit, a Lean and Environment Toolkit, an Environmental Professionals Guide to Lean and Six Sigma, and then Green Supplier Network. So one of those areas might be of interest for you to look at. And they kind of give you a process and some tools and a pretty good framework for kind of trying to incorporate a lot of these ideas. IBM has a Green Sigma program they've been rolling out the last 4 or 5 years. Zero Waste Network, trying to look at how companies can go to zero waste, completely like West Liberty Foods has done. GE has a whole Eco-Imagination organization that they've looked at how do we, for future products for GE, that they're kind of have this green emphasis to them. And then there's energy management guidebooks on how to reduce energy, understand your energy bills, which are somewhat complicated. Just everything you want to know about. That's it. So does anyone have any other questions or thoughts or comments? Again, the intent here was to try to just get you familiar with some of the terms, make you aware that there's already a lot of good benefits that are coming out of lean activities, but there's also going to be some bigger improvements if you kind of focus on that as a dedicated effort in your facility. And there's those side benefits that come along with a lot of these things that are more than just saving money, that are hard to quantify, but